I'm Kimberly Ward, 32, and I've always been the dependable sister. Throughout our lives, I've helped Natalie, my 28-year-old sister, through countless crises, financial emergencies, emotional breakdowns, and professional setbacks. I never expected gratitude, but I also never expected betrayal. Sometimes the people closest to you reveal their true colors in the most painful ways, and when they do, you have to decide if family loyalty outweighs self-respect. Before I dive into the story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. If my experience resonates with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to join our community of people who've learned tough lessons about family boundaries. Now, let's get into how I discovered who my sister really was. My life has always been structured around responsibility. After graduating with honors from Berkeley, I climbed the corporate ladder at a prominent marketing firm in San Francisco. By 30, I was leading my own team and earning a comfortable six-figure salary. I've always been careful with money, investing wisely, maintaining an emergency fund, and living below my means in a modest but well-located apartment. Natalie, on the other hand, has been the family's free spirit. She dropped out of college twice, cycled through jobs every few months, and developed a knack for financial catastrophes. Her rent was perpetually late. Her car was always breaking down. Her credit score resembled a failing grade. And somehow, it was always someone else's fault. Our parents, Robert and Ellen Ward, established the dynamic early. Kimberly, help your sister with her homework. Kimberly, lend Natalie your car since hers isn't working. Kimberly, can you cover Natalie's portion of the family vacation? She's going through a rough patch. My role as family safety net was cemented before I even had my first job. Our brother Daniel, 30, watched this pattern with concern but typically remained neutral. That's just how they are, he'd say when I complained. Mom and Dad always saw Natalie as needing more help. He rarely intervened, though occasionally he'd tell me privately that I was being taken advantage of. The financial support started small, $50 here, $100 there for unexpected expenses. But as my income increased, so did Natalie's requests. I helped with her security deposit when she was unfairly evicted from her apartment. I covered her share of our mother's 60th birthday cruise when she was between jobs. I even paid off her $7,000 credit card debt when she tearfully promised to be more responsible. Her gratitude followed a predictable pattern, effusive thanks followed by radio silence, then another crisis requiring my assistance. Each time, the thanks became less genuine and more perfunctory, sometimes just a quick text, "You're the best. I owe you." I started calculating that I'd given her over $25,000 in 5 years, with nothing to show for it except vague promises to pay me back when things turn around. Despite growing resentment, I continued helping. Our parents made it clear that this was expected. "She's your sister," my mother would say. "Family takes care of family." My father was more direct. "You can afford it, Kimberly. Not everyone is as fortunate as you." Then came Trevor Hayes. Natalie met him at a charity event she was working as a server. He was handsome, charismatic, and supposedly the marketing director for a tech startup. They moved quickly. Within 3 months, she was describing him as the one. I was happy for her but concerned by how quickly she'd fallen. When we first met, Trevor charmed me with industry talk and compliments about my career. "Natalie says you're the marketing genius in the family," he said, sipping expensive scotch. "I'd love to pick your brain sometime." But something felt off. His knowledge seemed rehearsed, superficial. When I asked specific questions about his company, he redirected the conversation with practiced ease. Little things nagged at me. How he insisted on ordering for Natalie at restaurants. How his successful career never seemed to translate into financial stability. How he always had stories about important meetings with unnamed executives. How Natalie started dressing differently, speaking differently, even laughing differently around him. "Trevor thinks I should try modeling," she told me over coffee, flipping her newly highlighted hair. He knows people in the industry. When I gently suggested that modeling agencies approach prospective models, not the other way around, she rolled her eyes. You always think you know everything, Kim. I dismissed my concerns as overprotectiveness. Natalie was an adult, and if Trevor made her happy, who was I to judge? I couldn't have known then how completely wrong I was, or how much that misjudgment would cost me. The invitation came via text on a Tuesday afternoon. Dinner Friday at 7. Trevor and I have big news. Dress nice. No please, no acknowledgement that I might have plans. Just the expectation that I would show up. I hesitated before responding. That Friday was the end of a grueling work week with a major client presentation. All I wanted was takeout and Netflix. But curiosity and obligation won out. Congratulations. I'll be there. Where are we meeting? The restaurant Trevor chose, Laurel Heights, was one of San Francisco's most exclusive establishments. Getting a reservation typically required booking months in advance or knowing someone influential. I wondered how Trevor had managed it as I handed my car to the valet, smoothing down my black cocktail dress. Inside, crystal chandeliers illuminated white tablecloths and gleaming silverware. A string quartet played softly in the corner. Trevor and Natalie were already seated at a prime table overlooking the bay. As I approached, Natalie thrust out her left hand, a sizable diamond sparkling on her ring finger. We're engaged, she squealed, loud enough to draw glances from nearby diners. Trevor put his arm around her shoulders, looking pleased with himself. Wow! Congratulations! I kissed her cheek and shook Trevor's hand, noticing his crisp designer suit and gold watch. This is quite the venue for an announcement. Only the best for my future wife, Trevor said, signaling a waiter. Let's start with a bottle of Dom Perignon, 2008, if you have it. The waiter nodded deferentially. Excellent choice, sir. As champagne was poured, I noticed the menu had no prices listed, never a good sign for one's wallet. But surely Trevor wouldn't have chosen this place if he couldn't afford it. So when did this happen? I asked, raising my glass in a toast. Last weekend, Natalie gushed. We were hiking in Napa, and at sunset, he got down on one knee with this gorgeous ring. She extended her hand again, tilting it to catch the light. It's beautiful, I said sincerely. Have you set a date? We're thinking spring, Trevor interjected. A destination wedding, perhaps Santorini or the Amalfi Coast. I nearly choked on my champagne. That sounds expensive. You only get married once, Trevor said with a wink that made me uncomfortable. Besides, Natalie deserves the best. As we perused the menu, they continued discussing wedding plans, designer gown, 100-person guest list, honeymoon in Bali. I wondered how they planned to finance this extravaganza given Natalie's perpetual unemployment and my growing suspicion that Trevor's career wasn't as lucrative as he claimed. The ordering process confirmed my concerns. Trevor selected the chef's tasting menu with wine pairings, the most expensive option. We should celebrate properly, he insisted when I suggested the regular menu might be sufficient. Natalie ordered the Wagyu beef and lobster tail combination, while I chose a more modest pasta dish, my appetite diminishing with each extravagant selection. Conversation throughout dinner centered entirely on their relationship and future plans. Neither asked about my life or work. When I mentioned my recent promotion, Natalie quickly redirected. That's nice. But listen to what Trevor's planning for the honeymoon suite. By dessert, an elaborate chocolate soufflé with gold leaf, subtle hints about payment began. This economy is brutal on startups, Trevor sighed, checking his phone. Our funding round is delayed another month. And I'm still waiting to hear back about that receptionist position, Natalie added, scraping the last chocolate from her plate. But things will turn around soon. When the bill arrived, Trevor made a show of patting his pockets. Oh no, he frowned, looking genuinely distressed. I've forgotten my wallet. Must have left it in my other jacket. Natalie's expression shifted from surprise to embarrassment to expectation as she turned to me. Kim, Could you possibly? We'll pay you back as soon as Trevor's funding comes through. The bill totaled $578.42. I stared at it, feeling a familiar sinking sensation. Part of me wanted to refuse, to point out that they'd chosen the restaurant and ordered without regard for cost. But making a scene would only create family drama I didn't have the energy for. Sure, I said tightly, sliding my credit card into the leather folder. No problem. You're literally saving our lives, Natalie said, the relief in her voice palpable. We'll get you back next time, promise. Trevor's thanks were equally effusive, but rang hollow. You're an angel, Kimberly. Natalie's lucky to have such a generous sister. We parted in the restaurant lobby, Natalie hugging me quickly before they climbed into an Uber. Thanks again. Love you. After they left, I realized I'd forgotten my purse at the table. Turning back, I pushed open the heavy restaurant door and froze at what I heard. Trevor's distinctive laugh carried across the now emptying dining room. Did you see her face when the bill came? Priceless. I told you she'd pay, Natalie's voice responded, smug and unfamiliar. Kim's such a sucker. Always has been. Your sister's loaded but dresses like a librarian, Trevor continued. All that money and no style. At least it's coming in handy for us. She'll probably help with the wedding too, Natalie said, her voice dropping as a waiter passed. I've just got to give her the sad eyes and mention family obligation. The bank of big sister, Trevor laughed again. Making withdrawals is too easy. Next time we'll hit her up for the honeymoon fund. She thinks she's so perfect, Natalie's voice hardened. Miss Responsible with her perfect job and her perfect apartment. It's about time she shared the wealth. Well, she's the perfect ATM, Trevor replied. And we've got the PIN code, family guilt. They continued, unaware of my presence just beyond the doorway. I stood frozen, my heart pounding in my ears, as they systematically mocked my appearance, my career, my apartment, even the way I'd asked for my pasta to be prepared. Every insecurity I'd ever had was laid bare and ridiculed by the two people who'd just accepted my financial help without hesitation. I backed away silently, retrieving my purse from a concerned waiter who'd found it. Outside in the cool night air, I fumbled for my valet ticket, tears blurring my vision. The drive home passed in a haze of shock and humiliation, their cruel laughter echoing in my mind. My phone pinged with a text from Natalie. Thanks again for dinner. You're the best sister ever. The message felt like another slap. I turned off my phone and drove into the night, feeling more alone than I ever had before. The full impact didn't hit until I was safely inside my apartment. I collapsed onto my sofa, still in my cocktail dress, and broke down completely. Ugly, gasping sobs racked my body as the reality of what I'd heard penetrated the shock. My sister, my baby sister whom I'd protected and supported her entire life, had been using me. Worse, she actively resented and ridiculed me behind my back. Around midnight, I called Michelle, my best friend since college. Can you talk? I asked, my voice still raw from crying. What's wrong? She asked immediately. Are you hurt? The concern in her voice triggered fresh tears as I recounted the evening's events. When I finished, silence hung on the line for several seconds. Kim, Michelle finally said, her voice gentle but firm. I need to tell you something I should have said years ago. This isn't the first time Natalie has talked about you this way. What? The single word was all I could manage. At your parents' anniversary party last year, I overheard her in the bathroom with her friends. She was bragging about how easy it was to get money from you. How you were her personal scholarship fund. Why didn't you tell me? I whispered, though I already knew the answer. You wouldn't have believed me, Michelle said simply. You've always defended her, made excuses for her behavior. I thought confronting you would just damage our friendship. She was right. I would have accused her of misunderstanding or exaggerating. My identity as Natalie's protector was so deeply ingrained that I'd been blind to the obvious. I wasn't helping her. I was enabling her. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. I spent the day in a fog, alternating between numbness and fresh waves of hurt. Around noon, I started a journal entry that became a cataloging of my financial support to Natalie over the years. College tuition for her first attempt, $12,000. Bail money when she was arrested at a protest, $2,500. Car repairs after her accident, $3,800. Rent when she was between jobs, $5,400. Credit card debt consolidation, $7,200. Various emergencies and loans, $15,300 plus. The total, over $46,000, made me physically ill. And that didn't include smaller expenses, meals bought, bills paid, birthday and Christmas gifts far more expensive than what I received in return. The imbalance was staggering. Beyond money, I listed time and emotional labor, hours spent listening to relationship drama, professional disappointments, friendship conflicts. Vacations interrupted to handle Natalie's crises. Dates canceled to comfort her after breakups. A pattern emerged of one-sided sacrifice that I'd been too close to recognize. When was the last time Natalie had asked about my life? When had she ever offered help when I struggled? I couldn't remember a single instance. Our relationship existed entirely on her terms to meet her needs. Dr. Patterson, my therapist whom I hadn't seen in months, squeezed me in for an emergency session the following day. "What you're describing is a classic enabling relationship," she said after I recounted everything. "You've been meeting Natalie's needs at the expense of your own boundaries and well-being." "But she's my sister," I protested weakly. "Family helps family. Healthy families support each other reciprocally," Dr. Patterson corrected gently. "What you're describing is exploitation, not family support." We spent the hour discussing healthy boundaries and why they're especially difficult to establish with family. Dr. Patterson explained that my parents had designated me as the responsible one and Natalie as the troubled one, roles that served the family system but damaged both of us individually. "Natalie hasn't had to develop responsibility because you and your parents handle consequences for her," she explained. "And you've suppressed your own needs because being the responsible one became your identity. So what do I do now?" I asked, exhausted by the realization of how deep this pattern ran. "You establish boundaries," Dr. Patterson said firmly. "Financial support stops immediately. Emotional support becomes conditional on mutual respect. And you prepare for significant resistance, not just from Natalie, but from everyone who benefits from your enabling role." "My parents will be furious," I whispered. "Probably," she agreed. "The family system has worked for them. Your boundaries threaten that system. But Kim, what's the alternative? Continuing to be exploited by people who mock you behind your back." She was right. The thought of confronting my family terrified me, but the thought of continuing as their doormat was unbearable. Over the next week, I prepared methodically. I gathered bank statements documenting transfers to Natalie. I compiled text messages showing her pattern of crises and requests. I even contacted the manager at Laurel Heights, explaining my situation. Surprisingly sympathetic, he confirmed the restaurant had security cameras in the dining area and offered to provide footage if needed. I declined for now, but kept his card. I arranged to meet with Natalie alone, in a public place where emotions couldn't escalate uncontrollably. I practiced what I would say, focusing on specific behaviors rather than character judgments. I prepared for tears, anger, denial, all Natalie's typical tactics when confronted. The night before our meeting, Michelle came over with wine and moral support. "She'll try to make you feel crazy," Michelle warned. "She'll deny everything, then say you misunderstood, then minimize what happened." "I know," I sighed, staring into my glass. "She's been manipulating me for years. I just didn't want to see it." "You saw her as you wanted her to be," Michelle said kindly. "That's not a character flaw, Kim. It's just human." "I'm still terrified," I admitted. What if I can't go through with it? What if I give in again? Michelle took my hand. Then we try again. But Kim, remember what you heard. Remember how they laughed at you after taking your money. Hold on to that when your resolve weakens. I nodded, drawing strength from my friend's unwavering support. For too long, I'd prioritized a sister who saw me as nothing but a resource to exploit. It was time to reclaim my self-respect, whatever the cost. I chose Marlowe's cafe for our meeting, public enough to discourage a scene, but quiet enough for a private conversation. I arrived 20 minutes early, selecting a corner table and ordering herbal tea to calm my nerves. When Natalie walked in 15 minutes late, I'd already rehearsed my opening lines dozens of times. "Sorry I'm late," she said breezily, dropping into the chair across from me. Traffic was insane. She looked fantastic, new highlights, designer sunglasses, and what appeared to be a new leather jacket. I wondered bitterly if my $578 dinner had helped fund her shopping spree. "Thanks for meeting me," I said, keeping my voice steady. "There's something important we need to discuss." "Sure, but first," she leaned forward excitedly. "Trevor and I found the perfect wedding venue in Napa. It's this gorgeous vineyard with mountain views, but they need a deposit like yesterday to hold the date. Any chance you could help us out? Just temporarily." Her expression was practiced. Eager, but with a hint of vulnerability, calculated to activate my helping instinct. For a moment, familiar guilt tugged at me. Then I remembered her voice at the restaurant. "Kim's such a sucker. Always has been." "Actually, Natalie, that's related to what I wanted to discuss." I took a deep breath. After dinner Friday night, I went back to the restaurant to get my purse. "I overheard you and Trevor talking about me." Her expression flickered. Surprise, then alarm, then rapid recalculation. "What are you talking about?" "I heard you both mocking me, calling me a sucker, laughing about how easy it is to get money from me, planning to hit me up for wedding expenses." "That's ridiculous," she scoffed, but her eyes darted away. "You must have misheard." "I didn't mishear anything," I said firmly. "You called me the perfect ATM. Trevor made fun of how I dress. You complained that I think I'm perfect and said it's about time I shared the wealth." Her strategy shifted instantly. "Okay, maybe we said some things that sound bad out of context. We'd had a few drinks. Trevor was just joking around. And you? Were you just joking too when you called me a sucker? Kim, come on." Her tone turned cajoling. "Sometimes I vent, but you know I love you. You're my sister. Being family doesn't give you the right to exploit me." My voice trembled slightly, but I pushed forward. "I've supported you financially for years. I've dropped everything countless times to help you through crises. And in return, you mock me behind my back and strategize about how to get more money from me. You're blowing this way out of proportion," she protested, her voice rising. Several nearby customers glanced our way. So I said some stupid things. I was stressed about money. That doesn't erase our entire relationship. "Our relationship needs to change," I said, pulling an envelope from my purse. "I'm returning your house key. I'd like mine back." Her eyes widened. "Are you serious right now?" "I'm establishing boundaries, Natalie. I won't be providing any more financial support, not for the wedding, not for emergencies, not for anything. If you need money, you'll need to earn it or find another source." "This is insane," she hissed, tears welling. "You're my sister. You're supposed to help me. I have helped you to the tune of over $46,000 that I'll never see again. That stops today." She switched tactics, tears falling now. "I'm sorry if I hurt your feelings. I didn't mean those things. Please, Kim, don't do this to me. The wedding deposit is due Friday. We'll lose our date. That's not my problem anymore." The words felt both terrible and liberating. Her phone buzzed. Glancing down, she grimaced. "Trevor's calling. He's waiting outside. You can tell him my decision." Her expression hardened, tears vanishing as quickly as they'd appeared. "Fine. You want to be like that? Have it your way?" She stood abruptly. But don't expect me to forget this when you need something from me. When have I ever needed something from you, Natalie? Name one time. She opened her mouth, closed it, then turned and stormed out. Through the window, I watched her climb into Trevor's BMW, gesticulating wildly as she presumably relayed our conversation. I braced myself as Trevor's face darkened with anger. He pulled out his phone. Mine rang seconds later. Against my better judgment, I answered. What the hell is your problem? Trevor's voice was venomous. Your sister is crying because of you. My problem is people who use me for money then laugh about it behind my back, I replied calmly. That's a lie. Natalie worships you. I heard you both, Trevor. Every word. About me being a sucker, an ATM, having no style despite my money. I heard it all. A pause. Look, we'd had a few drinks. People say stupid things. That doesn't mean you abandon your sister when she needs you. I'm not abandoning her. I'm just not funding her lifestyle or your wedding anymore. This is really about the money, isn't it? His tone turned insinuating. You make 6 figures, but can't help your own sister have her dream wedding. That's cold, Kimberly. What's cold is exploiting family ties for financial gain, I countered. And this conversation is over. I hung up as he was mid-sentence, blocked his number, then did the same with Natalie's. My hands were shaking, but a strange calm settled over me. The confrontation I dreaded for days was over. The aftermath, however, was just beginning. My parents called within hours. Natalie's absolutely devastated. My mother began without preamble. What is this about you refusing to speak to her? I explained what had happened, including the overhead conversation. My mother sighed heavily. People say things they don't mean when they're stressed about money. You can't take it personally. I do take it personally when I'm being deliberately used and mocked, I insisted. My father took the phone. Kimberly, this wedding is important to your sister. You know she and Trevor don't have the resources you do. As family, we support each other. I've supported her for years, Dad. I've given her over $46,000 that I'll never see again. At some point, she needs to stand on her own feet. This isn't like you, he said disapprovingly. You've always been the reliable one. Maybe that's the problem, I suggested. Maybe being the reliable one has enabled behavior that's hurt everyone, including Natalie. The conversation ended in a stalemate, with my parents clearly expecting me to come to my senses within days. Instead, I held firm as the pressure mounted. My aunt called to tell me I was being selfish. My cousin texted that I was ruining Natalie's special time. Even my brother Daniel reached out, though his approach was more measured. I understand why you're upset, he said during our phone call. What they said was awful. But is cutting her off completely really the answer? I'm not cutting her off emotionally, I clarified. I'm just not funding her anymore. There's a difference. Mom and Dad are freaking out, he warned. They're talking about taking out a loan for the wedding if you won't help. That's their choice, I said, though the information pained me. But they should know that Trevor and Natalie were planning to ask me for much more than just the venue deposit. They have a whole list of wedding expenses they expected me to cover. Daniel was silent for a moment. Have you told them that? Would they believe me over Natalie? I asked bitterly. Probably not, he admitted. Just be careful, okay? This could blow up the whole family. I didn't start this fire, I reminded him. I'm just refusing to keep getting burned. In the weeks that followed, I leaned heavily on Jason, my boyfriend of 8 months, and Michelle. Both were unwavering in their support, helping me maintain perspective when doubts crept in. You're doing the right thing, Jason assured me after I declined my first family dinner since the confrontation. They need to respect your boundaries. But what if I'm overreacting? I worried, scrolling through yet another guilt-inducing text from my mother. Kim, they were literally plotting how to extract more money from you, he reminded me gently. After you'd just paid a $600 dinner bill. That's not normal family behavior. He was right, of course. But years of conditioning made standing firm incredibly difficult. Each time my resolve weakened, I returned to Dr. Patterson's words. What's the alternative? Continuing to be exploited by people who mock you behind your back. Slowly, painfully, I began to recognize the freedom in my new boundaries. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't constantly anticipating the next crisis, the next financial demand. I focused on my own goals, a home purchase I'd been delaying, a master's program I'd been considering. I even started dating Jason more seriously, no longer afraid that Natalie's needs would interrupt our relationship. The family pressure was relentless, but ultimately ineffective. I had found my voice, and I wasn't going back to silence. 2 weeks after our confrontation, Natalie's messages shifted from angry to desperate. The venue needs $5,000 by Friday or we lose our date, she texted from a new number I hadn't yet blocked. Please, Kim. I'm begging you. I didn't respond, but the texts continued. We've asked everyone else. No one can help. Trevor's startup funding fell through. We're desperate. Are you really going to ruin my wedding over one stupid conversation? Finally, fine. Be like that. I hope you're happy destroying my one special day. Trevor's messages, sent from unknown numbers, took a darker tone. Your sister is crying herself to sleep because of you. You'll regret turning your back on family. The most disturbing, people who hoard wealth while their family suffers get what they deserve eventually. I reported the last one to the police, who took a report but said it wasn't specific enough to constitute a criminal threat. Still, I changed my locks and installed a security system, unsettled by the escalating hostility. Through Daniel, I learned that Natalie and Trevor had approached every family member for wedding money. My parents offered $2,000, all they could afford on their fixed income. My aunt contributed $500. Even my grandmother was asked for her small savings. The pattern I'd interrupted was simply redirected, not resolved. They're telling everyone you promised to pay for the wedding then backed out, Daniel reported during one of our now regular coffee meetings. Natalie says you're punishing her for one offhand comment because you're jealous she's getting married before you. I laughed bitterly. Classic. Make me the villain to avoid accountability. Some people believe it, he admitted. Especially the relatives who don't know you well. But Mom and Dad are starting to ask questions. The story keeps changing. The social media campaign began next. Natalie didn't name me directly, but her meaning was clear. Heartbroken that someone I trusted completely has abandoned me during the most important time of my life. #family should be there. When people show you who they really are, believe them. Some sisters aren't worth the title. #blood doesn't always mean love. Trevor was less subtle, posting a long rant about entitled people who think their money makes them better than everyone else. Several mutual friends texted to ask if there was drama between Natalie and me, clearly fishing for gossip. I maintained a dignified silence online, but the situation took its toll. I lost sleep, lost weight, and struggled to concentrate at work. The constant barrage of guilt and hostility wore me down, making me question my decision despite knowing it was right. Michelle proved invaluable during this period, monitoring social media so I could disconnect, fielding questions from curious acquaintances, and reminding me of the facts when my resolve wavered. They're counting on you breaking, she pointed out during a weekend hike. Every text, every post, every rumor is designed to make you feel so guilty and uncomfortable that you give in. It's working, I admitted, pausing to look out over the bay. Sometimes I think it would be easier to just pay the damn deposit and be done with it. And then what? She challenged. The catering deposit? The dress? The flowers? When does it end, Kim? She was right. There would always be another emergency, another essential expense, another reason why I needed to open my wallet. The only way to break the cycle was to stay strong through the worst of the pressure. The final escalation came in the form of an ultimatum from my parents. They called one evening, their voices tight with disapproval. We're having a family dinner Saturday night, my father announced. Everyone will be there. We need to resolve the situation before it tears the family apart. What's to resolve? I asked. I've made my position clear. Kimberly and Ward, my mother interjected, using my full name as she had when I was a child in trouble. This has gone far enough. Your sister is suffering. The family is divided. You need to be the bigger person here. Why is it always my responsibility to be the bigger person? I demanded. Why doesn't Natalie ever have to take responsibility for her actions? Because she's struggling right now, my father said, as if it were obvious. And you're not. I'm struggling too, I said quietly. But no one seems to care about that. A heavy sigh from my mother. If you don't come Saturday and work this out, I don't see how you can be included in family gatherings going forward. This hostility can't continue. The threat hit me like a physical blow. Are you saying you'll cut me off if I don't give Natalie money? We're saying family harmony requires compromise, my father said firmly. 7 o'clock Saturday. Don't be late. After they hung up, I sat in stunned silence. My own parents were threatening to exclude me from the family unless I resumed my role as Natalie's personal bank. The injustice burned, but beneath the anger was a deep, aching grief. Had I ever been valued for myself, or only for what I could provide? The wedding invitation arrived the next day, an elegant cream envelope addressed in Natalie's distinctive handwriting. Inside was a formal card requesting my presence at this celebration of love between Natalie Ward and Trevor Hayes, along with a handwritten note. Kim, I know things have been difficult between us. But despite our disagreements, I can't imagine my special day without my sister. Please come and be part of this important moment in my life. Let's put our differences aside for the sake of family. Love, Natalie. The note was perfectly calibrated to trigger guilt while making Natalie appear magnanimous. There was no acknowledgement of wrongdoing, no genuine apology, just the expectation that I would put aside differences and presumably provide the expensive gift that would be expected of the bride's sister. I showed the invitation to Jason that evening. What do you think? I asked as he read Natalie's note. I think it's manipulative, he said bluntly. She's making a public gesture that puts pressure on you to reciprocate without addressing the actual problem. My parents are basically threatening to disown me if I don't make peace with her, I admitted, recounting their ultimatum. Jason's expression darkened. That's emotional blackmail, Kim. They're trying to force you back into the role that worked for them, regardless of how it affects you. So what do I do about Saturday? I twisted the invitation in my hands. If I don't go, I risk losing my relationship with my parents. If I do go, I'll be pressured to resume financial support. What if I come with you? Jason suggested. Having someone in your corner might help you stay strong. The offer touched me deeply. You'd do that? Walk into that lion's den with me. Of course, he said simply. You shouldn't have to face this alone. His support gave me the courage I needed. I would attend the family dinner, but I wouldn't go alone, and I wouldn't go unprepared. The time for passive resistance was over. If my family wanted a confrontation, they would get one, but not the kind they were expecting. Saturday arrived with a sense of foreboding. I spent the morning at a yoga class, trying to center myself for the confrontation ahead. Jason picked me up at 6, looking handsome and determined in a blue button-down shirt. You okay? He asked, squeezing my hand as we drove to my parents' house in the suburbs. Not really, I admitted. But I'm as ready as I'll ever be. Remember, he said, you have nothing to be ashamed of. You're setting healthy boundaries. If they can't respect that, it's their problem, not yours. I nodded, drawing strength from his confidence. In my purse was a folder containing documents I hoped I wouldn't need to use, but had prepared just in case. My parents' home was unchanged from my childhood, the same floral couch, the same family photos lining the hallway, the same smell of my mother's signature pot roast. The familiarity made what I was about to do even more difficult. Kimberly, my mother greeted me with a stiff hug. Her eyes widened slightly at the sight of Jason. We weren't expecting you to bring a guest. I hope that's all right, I said, though it wasn't really a question. You know Jason. Of course, my father said, shaking Jason's hand with forced politeness. Welcome. The atmosphere in the living room was tense. Daniel sat in an armchair, looking uncomfortable. My Aunt Patricia and Uncle Robert occupied the love seat, their expressions guarded. And on the couch, holding hands in a display of unity, sat Natalie and Trevor. Natalie had clearly been crying, her eyes red-rimmed and puffy. Trevor wore an expression of protective concern, his arm around her shoulders. The tableau was perfectly staged to cast them as victims and me as the villain. Well, my father said after awkward greetings were exchanged. I think we all know why we're here. This family is being torn apart by a disagreement that has gotten out of hand. I'd call it more than a disagreement, I said quietly, taking a seat with Jason beside me. Whatever you want to call it, my mother interjected. It needs to stop. Natalie is getting married in 3 months. This should be a happy time for our family. I agree, I said, surprising everyone. It should be a happy time. Which is why I was so hurt to overhear Natalie and Trevor mocking me after I paid for their $600 engagement dinner. We've apologized for that, Natalie said, her voice quavering. It was stupid and thoughtless. But is it worth destroying our relationship over one mistake? It wasn't one mistake, I countered. It was a revelation of a pattern that's existed for years. You take financial advantage of me, then resent me for being in a position to help you. That's not true, Natalie protested. I've always been grateful for your help. Grateful people don't mock their benefactors behind their backs, Jason noted calmly. Several heads turned toward him in surprise. With all due respect, Trevor said with thinly veiled hostility, this is a family matter. Jason is here because I asked him to be, I said firmly. He stays. My father cleared his throat. The point is, this situation has gone on long enough. Natalie and Trevor lost their wedding venue because they couldn't make the deposit. Your sister is heartbroken, Kimberly. I'm sorry to hear that, I said sincerely. But their wedding finances aren't my responsibility. No one's saying you're responsible, my Aunt Patricia interjected. But family helps family in times of need. That's always been our way. I have helped, I said, frustration building. I've given Natalie over $46,000 over the years. Money I've never seen again, despite promises to repay. I've been there for every crisis, every emergency, every financial disaster. And in return, I get mocked and manipulated. $46,000? My Uncle Robert repeated, clearly shocked. That can't be right. It is right, I insisted. I've documented every loan, every gift, every bailout. That's ancient history, Natalie said dismissively. We're talking about now. About my wedding. Your sense of entitlement is exactly the problem, I told her. You expect me to keep giving indefinitely, regardless of how you treat me. The conversation deteriorated from there. My parents insisted I was being selfish and unforgiving. Natalie alternated between tears and accusations. Trevor made veiled comments about wealth inequality and family obligation. My aunt and uncle tried to mediate but clearly sided with Natalie. Only Daniel remained silent, watching the dynamics unfold with troubled eyes. As the arguments circled endlessly, I felt a familiar pressure building, the urge to give in for the sake of peace, to assume the role they all expected of me. The weight of family expectation pressed down, suffocating my resolve. Then I felt Jason's hand on my back, a gentle reminder of his presence and support. I glanced at him, and he gave me a small, encouraging nod. In that moment, I found the strength to do what I had come to do. Enough, I said, my voice cutting through the cacophony. This isn't solving anything. Before this goes any further, there are some things you all need to know. I reached for my purse and removed the folder I'd prepared. I didn't want to do this, but you've left me no choice. What is that? My father demanded. Evidence, I said simply, and opened the folder. First, what exactly happened at Laurel Heights restaurant? I placed my phone on the coffee table and played an audio recording, not from the restaurant's security camera, but from my own phone, which I'd left recording on the table when I'd gone to retrieve my purse. Natalie and Trevor's voices filled the room, crystal clear and undeniable. Kim's such a sucker. Always has been. Your sister's loaded but dresses like a librarian. All that money and no style. She'll probably help with the wedding too. I've just got to give her the sad eyes and mention family obligation. The bank of Big Sister. Making withdrawals is too easy. The recording continued for almost 2 minutes, capturing every cruel joke, every mocking comment, every cynical plan to extract more money from me. As it played, the color drained from Natalie's face. Trevor stared stonily at the floor. My parents looked stricken. When it finished, silence engulfed the room. I let it stretch, the weight of what they'd heard sinking in. That's what I overheard that night, I said finally. Not an offhand comment, or a stupid joke. A deliberate discussion of how to continue exploiting me financially. We were just blowing off steam, Natalie stammered, but the excuse sounded hollow even to her own ears. Next, I continued, pulling out a spreadsheet, a complete accounting of all the money I've given Natalie over the past 8 years. Dates, amounts, purposes, and whether it was supposedly a loan or a gift. I handed copies to my parents and Daniel. You'll notice that the loans were never repaid, despite multiple promises. The total is $46,372, not counting smaller expenses under $50. My father stared at the document, adjusting his glasses in disbelief. This can't be accurate. Every entry corresponds to a bank record, I assured him, pulling out another sheaf of papers. I've highlighted the relevant transactions. And here are the text messages promising repayment. As they reviewed the evidence, I turned to Trevor. And finally, this is what a basic background check on Trevor Hayes revealed. I removed the final document from my folder. Trevor isn't the marketing director for a tech startup. He was briefly a marketing assistant at Tech Future Inc. before being terminated for misrepresenting his credentials. Before that, he worked as a car salesman in Sacramento, where he was also fired. He has 2 pending lawsuits for unpaid debts and a history of dating women from affluent families who mysteriously end up covering his expenses. Trevor shot to his feet. This is slander. You have no right to investigate me. Everything here is public record, I said calmly. I simply paid a service to compile it. Would you like to explain to my family why you lied about your career? Or should we discuss the previous engagement that ended when your fiancé's family discovered similar financial irregularities? The room exploded into chaos. My mother began to cry. My father demanded answers from Trevor. Natalie switched between defending Trevor and attacking me for humiliating her. My aunt and uncle whispered furiously to each other. Daniel sat in stunned silence, the spreadsheet clutched in his hand. And through it all, I remained calm, the burden of secrets finally lifted from my shoulders. The truth was out, for better or worse. Whatever happened next, I would face it with my integrity intact. The immediate aftermath of my revelations was as chaotic as I'd expected. Trevor stormed out after a failed attempt to discredit my evidence, slamming the front door hard enough to rattle the family photos on the wall. Natalie followed in tears, but not before hissing that she would never forgive me for humiliating her. My parents sat in stunned silence, the evidence spread before them like debris after a storm. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue while my father removed his glasses and pinched the bridge of his nose, a gesture I recognized from childhood disappointments. Why didn't you tell us sooner? My mother finally asked, her voice small. Would you have believed me over Natalie? I countered gently. She had no answer, which was answer enough. My aunt and uncle made awkward excuses and departed, clearly unsure how to process what they'd witnessed. Only Daniel remained, examining the background check on Trevor with growing concern. This guy is a con artist, he said, looking up at me. How did you find all this? I hired a private investigator after the restaurant incident, I admitted. I wanted to understand who I was dealing with. You didn't trust my judgment, my father said, an edge of defensiveness in his voice. I didn't trust my own, I corrected him. I needed objective facts. Jason suggested we order pizza since dinner had been forgotten in the confrontation. As we ate in the kitchen, a strained, subdued meal, my parents gradually began asking questions. Not accusations or defenses, but genuine questions about incidents I'd documented, patterns they'd missed, warning signs they'd ignored. We thought we were helping her by not being too hard on her, my father confessed. Now I wonder if we did just the opposite. You did what you thought was right, I said, surprising myself with the absence of bitterness. We all did. Around midnight, as Jason and I prepared to leave, my mother hugged me tightly. I'm so sorry, Kimberly. We should have seen what was happening. I didn't see it either, I reminded her. Not until it was impossible to ignore. What happens now? My father asked, looking suddenly older than his 62 years. I don't know, I answered honestly. That depends partly on Natalie. The next morning, Daniel called with startling news. After leaving our parents' house, Natalie and Trevor had a massive fight in the car. She demanded explanations about the background check revelations. His dismissive responses escalated to verbal abuse. When she threatened to end the engagement, he'd revealed his true colors completely. He told her she was worthless without her family's money, specifically, your money, Daniel reported. Said she was a means to an end. When she tried to get out of the car, he grabbed her arm hard enough to leave bruises. My stomach clenched. Is she okay? Physically, yes. She got out at a stoplight and called Dad to pick her up. She stayed at their house last night. Mom took pictures of the bruises for a police report. My God, I breathed, shock giving way to a protective anger I hadn't expected to feel again. Is she pressing charges? She's considering it. Trevor's been calling and texting nonstop, alternating between threats and apologies. Classic abuser behavior. I closed my eyes, processing this new information. Does she need anything from me? A pause. Actually, she asked if you would come over. Said she needs to talk to you alone. I found Natalie in our childhood bedroom, sitting cross-legged on the bed where she'd slept until college. She looked smaller somehow, her confidence deflated, her eyes swollen from crying. An angry purple bruise marked her forearm. Hey, I said softly from the doorway. She looked up, her expression a complex mixture of shame, defiance, and vulnerability. Hey. I sat beside her, leaving space between us. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. He's been lying to me about everything, she finally said, her voice flat. The startup, his family background, his education. It was all fabricated. I'm sorry, I said and meant it. That's a terrible betrayal. You know what's worse? She gave a hollow laugh. Part of me knew. I ignored red flags, inconsistencies in his stories. I wanted to believe he was this successful, charming man who chose me. How pathetic is that? It's not pathetic to want to believe in someone you love. She looked at me directly for the first time. Is that why you kept helping me? Because you loved me despite the evidence I was using you. The question caught me off guard with its insight. Maybe I admitted. Or maybe I just needed to be needed. She nodded slowly. I've been awful to you, Kim. Not just at the restaurant. For years. Yes, I agreed. Not unkindly. You have. I think. She hesitated, picking at a thread on the bedspread. I think I resented you for having everything together. For making it all look so easy when everything was so hard for me. It was easier to take advantage than to admit I envied you. My life isn't perfect, Nat. I've just made different choices. I know that now. She sighed deeply. Trevor wasn't just using me for access to your money. He was. I think he was isolating me from you. Every time I'd mention calling you for something other than money, he'd make little comments about how you thought you were better than everyone else, how you probably didn't have time for me. He'd say we didn't need your help, then turn around and plan ways to ask for more. The manipulation tactic was so obvious in retrospect. That's what abusers do, I said gently. They isolate their victims from support systems. I let him do it, she whispered. I participated in it. You're not responsible for his actions, Nat. But I am responsible for mine. She met my eyes again. I'm sorry, Kimberly. For everything. The restaurant, the lies, the manipulation. You deserved better from your sister. The apology I'd wanted for so long landed differently than I'd expected. Instead of vindication, I felt a complicated sadness for all the years we'd lost to this dysfunctional pattern. Thank you for saying that, I said simply. I broke off the engagement, she continued. I'm filing a restraining order tomorrow. The police have been notified about his threats. That's good. He's dangerous, Nat. I know that now. She touched the bruise on her arm absently. Mom and Dad said I can stay here until I figure things out. I'm looking for jobs, real ones this time. No more waiting for rescue. Something in her voice had changed, a new determination I hadn't heard before. Perhaps hitting rock bottom had given her clarity I couldn't provide despite years of trying. What do you need from me? I asked cautiously. Nothing, she said quickly. I mean, not money or anything. Just maybe a chance to prove I can be a better sister. Eventually. It wasn't a small request, given our history. Trust, once shattered, doesn't mend easily. But looking at her, genuinely remorseful, genuinely trying, I found I wasn't ready to close the door completely. I'd like that, I said carefully. But Nat, things can't go back to how they were. I need boundaries. I know. She nodded vigorously. I don't expect you to trust me overnight. I just want a chance to earn it back, even if it takes years. For the first time in our adult relationship, we were speaking honestly to each other, without manipulation or resentment clouding the communication. It wasn't reconciliation, not yet, but it was a beginning. As I left my parents' house that day, my mother caught me in the hallway. There's something else you should know, she said, her expression troubled. Your father and I have been looking through financial records after seeing your documentation. We found something disturbing. She showed me bank statements revealing large withdrawals from their retirement account, nearly $30,000 over the past year. We thought they were system errors or maybe your father was making investments he'd forgotten to mention, she explained. But after your revelations about Trevor, we confronted Natalie. She admitted that Trevor had convinced her to ask for money for various emergencies. We gave her access to our accounts years ago for emergencies. The betrayal went deeper than I'd realized. They stole from your retirement fund? Natalie claims she didn't know that's where the money was coming from. Trevor would tell her what to say to us to get specific amounts. Whether she knew or not, the result is the same. Our retirement savings are significantly depleted. The full picture of Trevor's scheme emerged over the following weeks. He had systematically targeted Natalie as a means to access family money, using classic manipulation tactics to isolate her and normalize his increasingly exploitative behavior. The wedding was never his goal. It was simply the next phase in a long-term financial exploitation strategy. More disturbingly, we discovered he'd done this before. His previous engagement had ended when his fiancé's brother uncovered a similar pattern of financial manipulation and isolation. That family had chosen to pay him off rather than risk public embarrassment, a decision that had unknowingly set him on a path to our door. The final twist came when Trevor, desperate after losing access to what he saw as his meal ticket, attempted to break into my parents' home while Natalie was there alone. The security system I'd insisted they install after the revelations alerted police, who arrested him on the spot. In his car, they found printouts of my parents' financial information, including account numbers and passwords Natalie had unwittingly provided. The arrest led to charges not just for the break-in attempt and previous assault, but for identity theft and fraud related to accounts he'd opened using my parents' information. What had begun as a family conflict had evolved into a criminal case that would eventually send Trevor to prison for 4 years. In the aftermath, our family began the slow process of healing, not just from Trevor's predation, but from the dysfunctional patterns that had made us vulnerable to it in the first place. The year following Trevor's arrest was one of profound transformation for our family. Like a house with a crumbling foundation, we had to deconstruct unhealthy patterns before rebuilding something stronger and more sustainable. Natalie's journey was perhaps the most dramatic. After the restraining order against Trevor became permanent, she faced the daunting task of rebuilding her life from scratch. With no job, poor credit, and a shattered sense of self-worth, the path forward wasn't clear. "I don't even know who I am without someone telling me," she confessed during one of our tentative coffee meetings. First it was mom and dad, then various boyfriends, then Trevor. "I've never just been me." I suggested therapy, offering to help find someone, not to pay for it, a distinction that represented our new boundaries. To my surprise, she agreed immediately and found a sliding scale clinic where she could afford sessions by working part-time at a local bookstore. Our reconciliation progressed in small steps. First, regular phone calls where we discussed neutral topics like books or films. Then occasional dinners where deeper conversations emerged. Finally, a weekend trip to a nearby lake where we talked for hours about our childhood, our perceptions of each other, and the family dynamics that had shaped us both. "I was so jealous of you," Natalie admitted as we sat by the water. "You seem to do everything right without even trying. Good grades, good job, good relationships. Meanwhile, I was constantly struggling and failing." "It wasn't without trying," I corrected her. "I worked incredibly hard. But I was jealous of you too, in some ways." "Of me?" She looked genuinely baffled. "Why? You lived freely. You took risks. You weren't constrained by everyone's expectations of perfection. Do you know how exhausting it is to be the responsible one all the time?" This exchange marked a turning point. For the first time, we saw each other as complex individuals rather than the simplified roles we'd been assigned: golden child and screw-up, responsible one and free spirit, giver and taker. My parents underwent their own transformation. The financial impact of Trevor's exploitation forced them to confront their enabling behaviors and the long-term consequences of treating their daughters so differently. We thought we were protecting Natalie because she seemed more vulnerable, my father acknowledged during a family therapy session. Instead, we prevented her from developing resilience and self-sufficiency. "And we burdened you, Kimberly, with responsibilities that weren't yours to bear." My mother nodded tearfully. "We expected you to be an adult from such a young age. To always be the strong one, the one who had it all together. That wasn't fair to you." Their retirement plans had to be adjusted due to the financial losses, a tangible consequence that reinforced the importance of our new family boundaries. They sold their 4-bedroom house and downsized to a comfortable condo, using the equity to rebuild their savings. The process was painful but ultimately liberating. "We have less stuff but more peace," my mother told me as we unpacked boxes in their new place. I never realized how much energy went into maintaining appearances. Family therapy became a monthly commitment, providing a structured environment to address lingering issues and prevent backsliding into old patterns. Dr. Marshall, our family therapist, introduced concepts like differentiation and triangulation that helped us understand how our family system had functioned and dysfunctioned for decades. "Healthy families support interdependence, not codependence," she explained. "Each member maintains their individuality while still being connected." This framework gave us language to discuss problems that had previously seemed too nebulous to address. When old patterns emerged, my mother calling me instead of Natalie to handle a computer issue, or my father making an offhand comment about financial help, we could identify and redirect them constructively. Daniel, who had often been the forgotten middle child in our family drama, found his voice during this period. "I always felt invisible," he admitted during one particularly emotional session. "The dynamic was so focused on you two that there wasn't space for my needs or accomplishments." This revelation prompted yet another layer of family reckoning and healing. We began consciously creating space for Daniel's experiences, discovering aspects of his life we'd overlooked for years. His promotion at work, his volunteer work with homeless youth, his quiet but persistent efforts to maintain family connections despite the chaos. By the 1-year anniversary of the family confrontation, tangible changes had taken root. Natalie had completed a certification program in graphic design and secured an entry-level position at a small agency. She lived in a modest studio apartment that she paid for entirely herself, a first in her adult life. "It's nothing fancy," she said when I visited, "but it's mine. I earned it." The pride in her voice was something new, not the defensive pride that had masked insecurity for years, but the genuine satisfaction of self-sufficiency. My parents had adjusted to their downsized lifestyle with surprising enthusiasm, discovering that retirement without the burden of a large house allowed for small pleasures they'd previously postponed. They began traveling modestly, taking weekend trips to coastal towns and national parks. My own life transformed in ways I hadn't anticipated. The energy previously consumed by Natalie's crises and family tension redirected into personal growth. I completed the master's program I'd been considering for years. I bought a small house with a garden. Most significantly, my relationship with Jason deepened into something I could fully trust and enjoy without the constant interruption of family emergencies. On a crisp autumn evening, exactly 13 months after the confrontation that had changed everything, Jason proposed during a sunset hike on the same trail where we'd discussed the family ultimatum. As he slipped a vintage sapphire ring onto my finger, I felt a sense of peace I'd never known before. "Yes," I said simply, and kissed him as the city lights began to twinkle below us. Later that night, I called Natalie first with the news, a choice that would have been unimaginable a year earlier. "I'm so happy for you, Kim," she said warmly. "Jason's a good man. A real one." "Thank you," I said, hearing the sincerity in her voice. "It means a lot that you think so." A pause then. "I've been thinking about what to get you as an engagement gift. I know it can't make up for everything, but I've been putting aside a little from each paycheck. It's not much, but it's a start on paying you back." "Nat, you don't have to." "I want to," she interrupted firmly. "Not because you need it or expect it, but because it's right. Because I'm keeping my promises now." The gesture moved me deeply, not for the money itself, but for what it represented, her commitment to our new relationship, built on mutual respect rather than exploitation. "Thank you," I said again, my voice thick with emotion. As I reflect on the journey from that painful night at Laurel Heights to today, I'm struck by how necessary the breakdown was for genuine healing to occur. The confrontation that I'd feared would destroy my family ultimately saved it, replacing toxic patterns with healthier connections. We're not perfect. We still have moments of tension and misunderstanding. But we're authentic in ways we never were before. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's an act of love for yourself and ultimately for those who need limits to grow. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do for someone is to stop rescuing them from the consequences of their actions. And sometimes the bravest thing we can do for ourselves is to demand the respect we deserve, even when it means standing alone. I'm curious about your experiences with family boundaries. Have you ever had to make tough decisions to protect your well-being? How did your family respond? Share your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more content about family dynamics and personal growth. And don't forget to hit that share button if you know someone who might benefit from this story. Thank you for listening, and remember, true family supports your growth, not your exploitation.